Polycab and CNBC-TV18 present Infra Safety, powering India's electrical future.
Welcome to Polycab and CNBC-TV18 present Infra Safety, powering India's electrical future podcast. I'm Gautam, Srinivasan, and today we are diving deep into a critical yet often overlooked aspect of real estate, that is electrical safety. Joining us is Rohit Uchil, Principal Consultant at Integrated Technical Services, a veteran with over 30 years of experience in building services engineering. Now, from tackling electrical hazards in Mumbai's high-rises to embracing innovative solutions for smart cities, Rohit brings a wealth of insight. So let's get started as we explore how we can make India's infrastructure safer, smarter, and more resilient. Rohit, great to have you on the show.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Gautam. Thank you for having me.
We've got lots to talk about, so I'm going to start things off with you giving us an overview of the projects that you've worked in Mumbai when it comes to real estate, and tack on to that this point of infrastructure. How critical a theme is it, and how critical a theme is electrical safety for that matter?
Right. So I've been in this industry, as you said, for quite a while now. It's been almost 30 years since we've been doing MEP design. One of the things that is very, what we've seen through the years is that the size of project development has gone up exponentially. When we started doing modern buildings, so-called modern buildings, which were over 20 stories tall, the average construction area of a building would be maximum, say, about 1 lakh square feet. So the Citibank building that we did when I had started my career in MEP was 80 to 90,000 square feet. But it was considered to be very, very large.
And where do things stand right now?
Today, 1 million, that's 10 lakhs, 2 million, 3 million. Integrated mixed-use development is the norm. It's not the exception. Everybody wants to come to a facility which has a hotel, which has a convention center, which has shopping, it has retail, it has...
so it's multi-use, more multi-use.
Some residential, some service departments, and this is now being catered to by most of our premier developers.
And so in the context of this change that you've seen on a lot of multi-use developments coming in, what's the infrastructure safety concern and electrical safety concern like right now?
So in a place like Mumbai, where land is so expensive, to get the right amount of space in the right place for not only electrical infrastructure, but even fire infrastructure, water supply, air conditioning systems, because these are all the building systems that come together to form a working, good quality environment. So electrical safety is the most important, of course, but the other things also contribute. So to be able to get adequate space to design and implement very, very robust, efficient, and reliable systems is the big challenge. Having said that, things have changed. Today, there's a lot more awareness. Even smaller buildings the developers look out for MEP consultants. Even if it's a small plot, say in Bandra or any of our suburbs, the plots are typically 1,500 to 2,000 square meters. But even they would like to have a good MEP consultant on board who will design all the infrastructure services and put together.
So the ecosystem is evolving.
Yes. So when we started in the early 2000s, when I started my practice, many people didn't know what MEP stood for. And most of the design was done by the contractor. The person who was executing would also design. He would use his years of experience. He might not even be a qualified engineer. Right? But using years of experience in the industry, they did the
What has worked
the design.
before will work now. That's the idea they used
True.
to work with.
But in those days, the buildings were simpler. The requirements were, much less than they are today. Today, everybody wants to live in a fully air-conditioned apartment. Now, that requires 3 to 4 times the amount of electrical consumption as an apartment where only maybe one room or maybe no rooms were air-conditioned even 30, 35 years ago.
That actually brings me to my next question. Because of these evolving electrical needs of consumers, whether it's
Right.
business or whether it's residential, what are the electrical hazards that they should be aware of? What are the most common electrical hazards that people should be aware of, whether it's commercial or residential building?
So, if you take residential, commercial, or even hospitality, these systems that we design are more or less the same. Unless you're designing a data center where the electrical demand is 10x, and then that requires a different thought process altogether. In all of these cases, the designs are pretty much the same. Of course, in commercials, the electrical demand is a little more. In retail, the electrical demand is a little more. The proper design of the system where all the loads are catered to, the cables, wires, and switchgear are properly sized, not just, taken as per experience. That, in this project I did this, so in this coming project also, if I do this, it will work. It's not like that. There are complete system design standards. Our building codes are extremely good. They're rigid. They are pretty well formulated. We just have to follow them properly.
That's always been the issue, right? Enforcement. We have all the rules in place. The issue is enforcement. So from that perspective, when we look at these issues of electrical hazards, right? In your experience working with so many projects, how often do you attribute it to, say, an electrical hazard, to whether it's a faulty wiring, whether it's an overload or poor installation practices? On the ground, what's causing these issues, in your opinion?
So, in many cases, it is more of, yes, faulty wiring could also be a cause, but many times it is the interference or work on the system which is done post facto. Where somebody comes and modifies without proper
authorization
or understanding, without taking a look at the drawings which were developed at that time. So they come and insert something which doesn't work.
They won't understand load. Suddenly you have 4 ACs.
Then
where
you
2
have
ACs are
the loads become imbalanced. In many cases, the earthing systems are either overlooked or they are not maintained, because building earth is very, very important.
I've got enough electrical shocks from my electronic components to realize that earthing is not exactly a priority, especially for a lot of the older buildings.
For the older buildings. So in many of the older buildings where we've gone in to assess the condition, where the societies have called us to have a safety audit, there's been a fire in the neighboring building. So then these are the things that we immediately start looking out for. And it's not difficult. There has to be an effort to get it done and to do it regularly.
All right. Now, but given in Mumbai, there's an abnormally high number of old buildings. While there is a lot of development happening in the business areas, central business districts, or in southern Bombay, a lot of the other areas still have a lot of the older buildings. Now, from that perspective, what role do you see MEP consultants especially play when it comes to, minimizing risk while not disrupting operations? Because it's a last mile issue. Like you said, you've got all the codes in place, you've got all the experts in place. The problem then comes as to whether the society allows you to make those changes in an effective manner when it comes to what needs to be done in the area. What needs to be done for the society is another matter. But when it comes to the area, the society's approval is also required. So your thoughts?
So I take the analogy of a structural system. The building has a structure. The codes, like for instance, the BMC, the nodal agency in our case, they mandate that the structural audit should be carried out on a regular basis by a licensed structural consultant who's licensed by the BMC. Yeah, and that audit report has to be filed to allow you to continue to live in that building. we need the same thing, and not just lip service. We need the same thing for all the buildings, not only for electrical systems, which are the most important, but also for fire. These are the two things which are very important to ensure that in an older building also the systems are operational and safe.
So what should be the messaging
So
when it comes to
is that
upgrading electrical infrastructure?
the thing is that first of all, most societies stop at maximum hiring a structural consultant because that's a codal requirement. We don't, unfortunately, we don't have a formal system of becoming an MEP consultant. Even a non-technical person with years of experience making drawings can also design a MEP system. That is a dangerous
You think it should
precedent.
be codified now?
It should be codified. We should have a license to practice. That's very important. If you have a license to practice, that means you're filtering out a lot of unwanted or less talented or less qualified people who would otherwise have a free run. When for most of the time it doesn't matter, but when that event happens,
it's only post facto that everyone realizes.
Post facto, you start
so then,
looking at
in
it.
terms of value proposition, how would you pitch the idea of hiring an MEP consultant to upgrade electrical infrastructure? Broadly, electrical upgrade of infrastructure for societies will involve a cost, which is where they'll always...
The simplest thing for a society is to be able to make their common areas more efficient, less energy consuming. So we can help them put in solar photovoltaic systems. There are so many facilities which are available. So at least the common area, elevators, the pumps, the lights, the staircase, all the amenities that we have, those things the society doesn't have to bear the cost of. And at the same time, it also gives a benefit to the residents of the society because they know they're living in a building which is safe, and ultimately everybody lives with families. You have children, so it's the simple things like putting fire extinguishers which are suitable for kitchen fires. Why do fires happen in apartments? First thing to say is that it was an electrical fire because of a short circuit, but fires also happen in the kitchen. They also happen in the bedroom. Somebody is smoking, you fall asleep. Those embers light up. So in the case of a kitchen fire, we require a different type of fire extinguisher.
Absolutely.
So if you have one of those or two of those in a building of, say, 7 stories, and everybody is made aware that if there is this kind of fire, that you have to go get that extinguisher because that's what's going to...
Don't do the regular, let me pour some water
on it. Or, that kind of thing. So building awareness, very important.
If folks have seen Three Idiots, they will realize what happens if you pour water. Correct. But coming to the fact that, even cabling is important because the quality, and I'm especially insistent for my home to make sure that the cabling comes of top quality because that's a point of failure which can cause many issues.
So there are two aspects to cabling. One is that the cable has to be sized correctly. You need to select the right kind of cable. There are various types of cables. You need to select the right kind of cables for the environment in which it is being used. Needless to say, across residential, commercial, and other kinds of developments, retail, hospitality, the cables at the very minimal have to be fire retardant and low smoke. The cables should be installed in the correct manner. Today, the way you place the cable in a shaft, on a tray, on a cable tray, in many cases the cables are just stuck to the wall. Just take something, drill 2 holes, put it. That's it. That the work is done. So that kind of enforcement of, because these are all standard. The standards are available. Enforcing those standards, maybe there is a little bit of a gap in that.
I'm actually hoping the pressure comes from the consumer side because if you have a lot of high-end electronics at your home, you would like to safeguard that investment.
Absolutely.
Which means you make sure that your cabling solutions are done right so that you don't face a short circuit, taking out lakhs worth of...
So now we'll move to the home environment, right? So one part of the environment in a residential building is the common area, the elevators, the staircase, the areas around this, from where you enter into your apartment. And then from the infrastructure, from the meter room, the cables come up and they go to the apartment. Once you enter the apartment, equally important, the wires that you use.
Absolutely.
The conduits that you run your wires in. Today, everybody wants to put a beautiful false ceiling, hide everything, make a design. But what happens above the false ceiling? Who has oversight on that? If the wireman is not licensed, he will do anything. He will do wiring without earthing, 2 wires, take it, terminate, 3,
And you
4,
don't know, it's hidden.
5 circuits. So that is some place where emphasis needs to be given.
All right.
Today we use LED lights everywhere. The studio also has LED lights. Earlier it was not the case. So LED lights come with drivers. Drivers have some chips because, that's the basis. Everything's become smart today. It's not only a smartphone. Now, if you use a substandard LED light or a poor quality driver, that's your weakest point. That's the point from which failure can happen. And these are usually inside false ceilings. If they're inside false ceilings, you don't know when the smoke starts to build up and the
Before
fire
it gets
event
too
comes
late,
through.
which is where I'm hoping a lot of the IoT trends actually come into this space. But before I go into that aspect of our conversation, I also want to understand the challenges that you've seen, especially when it comes to skyscrapers. We've been talking about the ordinary apartment building or say the office building, which is about 5-6 floors. But let's come to the skyscrapers, which we are seeing increasingly more number of in Mumbai. Now, what are the challenges that you have seen when it comes to skyscrapers, especially when it comes to electrical safety, when you're designing and installing these electrical systems? What are the challenges that you've come across and how have you mitigated them?
So in skyscrapers, automatically, because there are so many floors, say for instance, let's define a skyscraper, right? Because in Europe, a skyscraper is 15 stories. Okay.
What is our definition?
So in our definition in Bombay today, above 40.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Above 30, 35 at least. So that, everybody is building tall buildings because the land size is small and the FSI is more now than it was when we started early 2000s. Maximum FSI was 2. Today FSI can be 4, 5, 6, sometimes higher. So because you're going higher, the number of apartments in the building are more. Consequently, the number of cables that need to be taken up to these apartments to give them electrical supply is more. So being able to provide properly for these cables, putting them in shafts, dressing them, making them accessible for maintenance, these are the most important things when you are doing the electrical distribution in these high-rise buildings. Now, without any choice to the developers or the clients that we work with, we insist any building which is tall and even the affordable housing or slum rehabilitation. Today slum rehabilitation buildings go up to 43, 44 stories. And each apartment is 300 square feet. And in that 40-story building, there will be at least 20 to 22 apartments, 24 apartments on a floor. So in a 40-story
volume
building,
of cabling which is going to be required.
800 apartments on a small size. How do I take cables? So universally, bus ducts. So rising main bus bars right from the main panel going up all the way to the floor. Every floor has a meter room and that meter room has smart meters. We are moving to the smart grid very, very quickly in at least in Bombay. And that makes it very safe. At every floor level, the shaft has to be fire isolated so that if for any reason there is a fire at one floor, it doesn't go below, it doesn't go above, it doesn't spread. So these are some of the things which, they're simple things. They don't cost. There was a lot of resistance to this bus riser system. We went to the Thane Municipal Corporation, the fire department. We gave them a presentation. We told them that, there are buildings now in the MMR, in Thane, in Mira Road, in Panvel and all, where all the buildings are now 40-story plus. We said we can't use the same old systems. Allow us to use bus ducts. The resistance was, who's going to climb up all these floors to read meters? We said smart meters.
Smart meters so that then the electrical provider
come with your
gets all the
laptop.
data.
The electrical provider comes with his laptop. He doesn't even plug in. It's all IoT based. You just come to the bottom of the building.
You can reach a stage where there's a nodal control center where the data gets transmitted, so you don't even need to send someone to kind of plug into the data and get all the readings.
Correct. So it was approved. That request from our side, and we had some of the people who manufacture. They came with us. They gave them a presentation. They proved that it is safer, and it was approved.
Fantastic.
And today we are doing it all across the city and the MMR. I mean, it's one of the good things that has happened in the last 5 years.
I'm hopeful this momentum builds because it's a use case momentum, right? The more the buildings and projects come on board, the easier it is for you to pitch for newer
It has
projects.
to. When we have precedent and when we have working precedent for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it's very...
The defenses come down.
The defenses come down.
All right. Now, you spoke about the effectiveness of the electrical safety codes in Mumbai. The fact that there are codes which are in place, which is great, but the question mark is on enforcement. What do you think needs to be done to make sure that electricity safety standards, basis the codes which have been laid out, are more effective? The codes are more effectively enforced. What do you think?
We need one single window nodal agency that will review designs, approve them. And we need one agency that will do periodic inspections. It can be private, it can be public, it doesn't matter. As long as it is transparent and it is followed. Say, for instance, a review of your electrical systems every 3 years or 5 years is more than enough. It doesn't have to be annually, because then it becomes like just obtaining a certificate, and then that leads to rent seeking, and then that leads to other things where then the resistance is there. Then you say, don't come, we'll send you something. So if we can do something as simple as that, I mean, it's probably not as simple, but it's something which is necessary. The bigger societies have now realized, because the liability is now on the committee members of the cooperative housing society, so they've realized that. So they say it's better to get a certificate of some third party. So tomorrow, if something untoward happens, we can say, here, we did this. Still, sorry, it happened.
But still it works. At least there's a certification, there's a certain process which is, in a sense,
it should
give
be
it out to someone, they authenticate it.
Right now it is voluntary. In our case, it should be formalized and made compulsory.
Absolutely. Somewhere there will have to be a regulatory enforcement, in a sense, to drive a certain habit, whether it's a corporate consumer or an ordinary consumer. Now, bringing into focus the projects that you work in, what steps are you taking to prevent fire incidents in your projects, and what are the safety protocols that you're implementing?
So we do, let's break it down into pre-facto and operational and post-facto. There are three phases of the life cycle of a project. One is on paper, one is during implementation, and one is post-implementation, right? So when you're designing on paper, that's probably the easiest thing to do. If you are an electrical engineer who understands code and is able to design as per these codes, you will design a system which is properly balanced, which is properly earthed, which has the right size of cablings, which has the correct switchgear, the correct safeties in the switchgear, the correct milliamp rating of the fault isolators, the ELCBs, the RCBOs. So that, if that is taken care of, then we move to the second step, which is the actual implementation. We have to make sure that the implementation happens as per our design, because it's quite likely that if there's no oversight, the electrical contractor might try to cut some corners to, especially if it's been a competitive bid, and then do some things which are not allowed.
So while your design might be top-notch, the implementation could be an issue.
So that's the second aspect. Also, in our case, especially with, the corporatization of the building industry, more professionalism coming into the picture, for the most part, things are fairly well taken care of. The major issue happens post facto. Once the building is done and operational, then you shouldn't allow the people who are operating that facility should not allow any kind of unsupervised, unlicensed or any kind of modifications or changes without
that is key, especially when it comes to individual residents taking the initiative.
Very simple. If you want to do anything to the structure of a building, the first thing you do is you pick up the phone and you'll call a structural consultant.
Absolutely.
In the electrical field and generally in the building services, that is not there.
All right. I want to take back one point which we mentioned earlier about the innovative ecosystem which is being built up, whether it's innovative technologies coming in. We are in the era of smart cities. So whether it's smarter cabling solutions or innovative electrical systems which are enhancing electrical safety, could you give us an idea of what you're doing in your projects to make them smart?
So at the city level or at the municipality level, we are very fortunate to have service providers who have already rolled out to a large extent, a smart grid kind of an environment. Because of our city being so big and so dense, it's happening in phases. That's why you see the roads are, always they're
Always dug up.
and we keep cursing them. So how does it work, right? There is your basic electrical system which has been there for 100 years, maybe more. Now on top of that, we have a layer of digitization that's coming.
All right.
Right? So what performance you measure, that performance you can achieve. If you're able to measure, if you're able to sense how the system is doing, what areas are consuming more, what areas are consuming less, you can balance the system.
You get a dashboard view. But in terms of the cable itself, are you seeing, I believe a lot of action is now taking place to make sure it's copper versus, say, aluminium, making sure that,
Not necessarily. Copper is very expensive. Copper is used up to a certain size. And then after that, we use aluminium. There's nothing wrong with aluminium cables. We shouldn't vilify it. Copper is great. It's lovely. I mean, if it was cheaper, that's probably
the quality of
we would
cabling
do.
is improving.
The quality of cabling. It's not only the conductor, right? The aluminium conductor is one element. There is the sheath, the protection, the what makes it fire retardant. All these things come together to ensure that the cable is stable, it doesn't overheat, and is safe.
Absolutely.
Again, the design aspect goes into it. You put the best quality cable and load it 10 times its rated capacity, it's going to fail. At some point of time, it's going to fail.
Now, speaking of coming together, electrical safety is not just the responsibility of MEP consultants. You need, as you mentioned, it's an ecosystem, right? Because you need developers on board, you need subcontractors, local authorities. Now, in your opinion, how can the ecosystem work together to ensure electrical safety standards in Mumbai's real estate sector improve from here on?
So, one thing is the corporatization of the management. That is that third stage of the life cycle that we discussed. Appointing an agency that understands these systems, has one qualified person, especially in a society where there are 6, 8, 10 buildings, 200, 300, 400 apartments. We can easily afford to have today on the rolls of the building a qualified, licensed electrical maintenance person, just like we have security, housekeeping. So we have this. So this building up this ecosystem is a coming together of the members of the society, the people who own. In many cases where there's single-use buildings, where the developer is using the building, giving it out, on lease basis. Say, for instance, a mall. It's very easy. You will automatically see people in uniform who are doing housekeeping. Maybe it's one of the IPCs, our local agencies who are doing the facilities management. The role of the facilities manager in the newer developments, because the reason I'm saying newer developments is because they're more dense, they are taller, they are wider, they have more people, they have more electrical demand per square foot. If you go to an older society which has 4-story buildings or 7-story buildings,
relatively lesser.
The demand on the electrical system is much less. In a brand new building, you have an electrical geyser which is instantaneous. You have endless amount of hot water which is being
centralized
supplied.
air conditioned systems. Right? But even from there, the nature differs. As you mentioned, you have malls, but you also have hospitals. You also have, residential and offices there itself. The nature of real estate changes when it comes to these profiles. So how different is it designing electrical safety for, say, a mall versus a hospital versus a residential versus a corporate?
It's not very different. The type of systems that we put in are more or less the same. The size of the system might be different, but the underlying design remains the same. That doesn't change. When you're designing a mall or a hospital, you're dealing with one entity. When you're designing a residential building, especially after it has been occupied, you're dealing with multiple entities with having different thought processes on how much should be spent on maintenance, how much should not, and what is necessary and unnecessary. So this unnecessary and necessary should be codified. So it has to be as per the code, that this is the rule and this is what has to be followed, and that's the end of it. It's not up to you. It's not discretionary. It's not voluntary. If it's discretionary and voluntary, anything can happen.
Absolutely.
Right? But so that's the difference between these type of like a commercial project, office building. Even in offices also can get sold to multiple users. We've seen a difference between a building which has one landlord and it's leased, and one which has been sold to multiple users, and it goes on both sides. A very well maintained building which has a landlord, and a badly maintained building which has a landlord, and a very well maintained building with a society and multiple users.
But
so
that
there
balance
is no
between discretionary and
very
enforced
important.
is very important.
Very important.
Absolutely.
Very important.
Before we wrap things up, Rohit, any tips that you would offer to our viewers when it comes to, say, maintenance of electrical systems to make sure electrical safety is the priority?
Even if it doesn't become codified or it doesn't become mandatory by law, an electrical system audit by the society or people who own the building every 3 to 5 years. Simple things. It doesn't cost too much. You know, just checking the loading in each phase of the power supply which is being used in the building. It can happen over a day or 2 days. Today you can get a thermal imaging camera, take it to all the electrical panels, and you can actually see if without even opening the panel or even touching it, you can see if anything is overheating, if something the termination is not proper, or, over a period of time, a weak termination has now started to give way. So it's starting to heat up. These things are there, right? So these simple measures, you don't have to spend tons of money to have a safe system. The thing is, the effort and the will to do it has to come on by the consumer, by the society, or by the people who own the systems. And that mindset change, because it is compulsory, we are doing it, or no, because we want to ensure that our systems are good, they are efficient, they are robust, and they don't overconsume. There's no loss of electricity. There's that kind of thing. And fire fighting systems, fire protection systems, simple things. Don't allow cables in any of the fire escape staircases. I've seen so many buildings where people have taken their AC outside
vent.
And then the cable and the copper pipe is running through the fire escape staircase. Recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for disaster. So these things should be extremely well managed and maintained. Putting things that are flammable in a fire escape corridor, blocking staircases, filling up the electrical room with your garbage recycled, with the garbage is going to be recycled.
We've gone through that. We've just cleared the electrical room in our building.
Right.
And it always looks like
somebody's furniture,
abandoned.
some chairs which were, those have gone in the electrical room. Small things. We don't have to do some, major thing. These are the small things that go a long way in ensuring a very safe electrical system.
And that's a very important message. Safety is sensible and inexpensive. That's what we are talking about. Well, that brings us to the end of this insightful podcast of Polycab and CNBC TV18 present Infra Safety, powering India's electrical future. A big thank you to our guests.
Thank you for having me, Gautam. Thank you
so much,
I
Rohit.
enjoyed this, yes.
And of course, Rohit has shared with us his expertise on electrical safety and infrastructure design. And remember, for our viewers, electrical safety is a shared responsibility. From developers to end users, we all have a role to play in ensuring a safer future. Until next time, stay safe and power up responsibly.
Polycab and CNBC TV18 present Infra Safety, powering India's electrical future.